Hello, and welcome to another episode of My Pocket Psych, the podcast all about the psychology of the workplace. I'm Dr. Richard McKinnon. I'm a chartered psychologist and coach. And this is another episode in our series all about sustainable leadership, where we're looking at aspects of what it means to be a leader, to think and act sustainably, and looking at leadership and leadership development through a more critical lens to help leaders behave in a way that's going to work for them and those around them over the longer term. And I'm delighted this time round to be joined by Dr. Petra Gwilliam, who is a fellow psychologist and is going to join me for a conversation all about the really important element of all of this, which is the mental health of leaders. By way of reminder, you're going to be able to find all of the resources that we mention online on the website at worklifepsych.com/sustainable leadership. Petra, you're very welcome. How are you doing today?
Great. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Richard. It's really good to be here and talk about this really important issue. So
It is important. And what I was really keen to do was speak to someone with the expertise in this area, because it's a topic where there's a lot of opinion. But what we're sometimes short on is evidence and science. And so what I'd love to do in this conversation is ensure we've got a science-infused, evidence-infused conversation to help people really understand what it is that we're talking about. Before we dive in, Petra, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience? Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Petra. Thank you. I'm a chartered coaching psychologist, but trained in the NHS as a clinical psychologist, and now work with people in workplaces. So I think I've been in psychology a long time. I graduated 30 years ago this year, and then trained in the NHS, as a clinical psychologist, and worked in a mental health trust, predominantly with children and families. And I think that's important. I'll come on to why I think that's important afterwards. And I think it's about essentially takes the system around us. It's not necessarily just about individuals, but the system that surrounds us. I also led services in the NHS, so psychology services in the service that I was in. So have some experience of the pressures of leadership. And also in the role that I was in, was really struck by the impact of the organisation on colleagues. So sort of have moved since and aim to work more preventatively, more systemically and more sustainably with lots of people, leaders.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I wanted to share that point about your clinical background. One of the challenges that we have when talking about a topic like mental health or mental ill health is sort of received wisdom out in the world or self-appointed experts. So I wanted to avoid that and some of those big pitfalls today. Let's start with that topic then. How do you talk about mental health when you're talking to your clients or to organizations? What are the key things you want them to understand about this very broad topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are lots of different definitions about mental health. And I think for me, and certainly with the people that I've worked with, there was one really nice one. The Mental Health Foundation talks about kind of our internal weather system. So, it's very changeable. It can change several times during a day. There can be sunny spells, there can be rain clouds. And I think I really like that analogy. I think mental health as well, it does change a lot, but sometimes we can feel really stuck when things have been really difficult, and it can feel different for us. So I think it's holding on to the hope that we know it will change, but sometimes we need a little bit more intervention to help it change if we're not having a good day or feeling stuck or feeling that we're going through a really difficult patch. When I've looked at definitions as well, and in my kind of practical experience, it always involves the commonalities of sort of thoughts, our feelings, emotions, and what we do, how we connect with people, what we're able to contribute. So I think that's sort of a more general definition of mental health. Obviously, in mental health services, people may receive a diagnosis, largely from a psychiatrist, of a mental health problem, but there has to be a number of criteria in order to kind of reached that kind of clinical threshold.
Mm.
So I like to normalize it, that we all have difficult experiences and we will all respond in different ways, and the environment can either help us or make it harder.
So what we've got there is looking at mental health from the perspective of a continuum, where we might move up and down that continuum.
Yeah.
And then mental health conditions are viewed a little bit more categorically. There are criteria that would lead to you getting a diagnosis. But for the vast majority of people we're talking about, it's where are you on that continuum, up and down, left and right, however you want to put it. That implies then that mental health deserves our focus on an ongoing basis, and not just when we might fulfill all those criteria working with a mental health professional.
Absolutely. And I guess one of my moves away from those systems was to kind of make that message, or to support that message really, and say, let's not wait till we're at a point of crisis. Let's do things proactively. Let's all support each other, have conversations that aren't just sort of reserved for the therapy space. We're able to talk about this more openly. I think it's a more compassionate way that we can be with ourselves and with other people, is to be able to talk honestly about the struggles that we have, because life is hard. The workplace is hard. The workplace brings challenges, and it's normal to experience a lot of the things that we experience.
Yeah, that normalizing is really important, isn't it? Because, that's sort of the ethos I adopt when coaching leaders, which is equipping them with the insight and the skills so that wherever possible, they can avoid reaching a point where they have to get that professional support for their mental health, or they end up burning out, or they end up using maladaptive coping strategies and make themselves ill through that. And obviously there is a continuum, and some people will always need that professional support. And that is an important point to make. This is not to say, if only you did this, this wouldn't have happened. But it's really good to have those skills and insights and resources to help you along the way, and not just view this as support is only when it's a crisis point, or I'm really, really not doing so well. I made that distinction between continuum and categories, and we've talked about the importance of an ongoing focus. Are there any really common misunderstandings about mental health that you'd like to bash while we're talking today?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the privileges of sort of the role of the psychologist is, I think, sometimes that we hear things that people might not say to other people in sessions, either in coaching sessions or therapeutic sessions. And I think, again, that we're more similar than different. A lot of the things that people bring, I guess it's on that normalizing thing again, really, things that other people will say. So a long time ago, well, not that long ago, a few years ago, I worked with about 200 leaders in a program, and the imposter came in a lot. Confidence comes in, feeling like we should be doing something, and acting in those ways. And there was a theme as well about it being about me, it being about only me, and it's my responsibility, and it's I need to be the person that does this. And I think that can only sometimes add to the load for leaders. I just wanted to pick up on your previous point as well, Richard, about the coaching sessions. And I know you use acceptance and commitment coaching. And so acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, has been used. There's a lot of research on it in therapeutic settings, but I know that I use it in coaching settings as well, in coaching relationships. And so I think I just wanted to pick up on that it's bringing it further forward, that we can use some of these tools and these strategies and these ways of thinking earlier on, so that we don't necessarily need to reach out for therapy, hopefully, if we're using them earlier on. So I would definitely recommend that to with an organisation, was to access coaching if it's available. Reach out.
I sometimes describe it as almost like an inoculation against life's challenges. If you've got these skills, that promote your psychological flexibility, you're better able to deal with the stuff that is inevitable, the difficult stuff. And it tends to snowball. Challenges don't come in isolation. We tend to hit a few of them at a time. And of course, then we can have the big life events that are almost inevitable, that are tough to deal with. But having a skill set to help you deal with what gets thrown at you enables you to keep going in a healthy way. But at the same time, one thing I've seen in discussions with leaders is that mental health is over there. It's, well, I'll deal with that when I need to, because that's mental health. For them, it's often mental ill health rather than, no, it's like physical health. You don't go for a run on January 1st and say, that's my physical health taken care of for the year. So rather an ongoing area of focus seems to be a much healthier way of looking at it.
Absolutely. Back to the prevention again, and the looking after ourselves, and the sort of applying the same things that we would recommend to colleagues or to friends, and doing that for ourselves. I mean, I don't know if sometimes I think when I've applied some of the things that I use in coaching, some of the ACT stuff, I feel much more able to cope with what life's going to throw at me. Whereas perhaps if I've got my head down and I'm busy, or I haven't, like you say, it's a physical health as well, haven't gone for that walk, everything's a lot harder. So it lightens things. It makes things more manageable when we practice these skills for the strategy.
I wholeheartedly agree. I needed to dip into my ACT toolkit on Tuesday evening when my laptop screen died while I was using my laptop. And in the scheme of things, this isn't a huge deal, but it's so easy for your mind to go crisis, catastrophe, and all the what ifs and what abouts. And I had to sort of talk myself back from I don't know what. But when you've got the skills, I could deal with this differently. I could deal with this in a different way that's more helpful or less chaotic, less emotional, whatever I was going to reach for. And those skills surprise people sometimes, don't they? Because they're very straightforward, everyday things we can do to contribute to dealing with challenges more sustainably. They're not necessarily reinventing yourself or doing something that leaders sometimes wonder, well, I don't want to do anything strange or unusual. And you mentioned going for a walk. There's nothing strange about that. But getting away from the source of pressure, getting a little bit of exercise, getting some space to think things through, there's nothing strange about that. And it can be really beneficial.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think sometimes one of the things that I often do is talk with the people that I'm working with about the nature of our mind, and that we're designed to survive. There's a part of our mind that is there. The older structures of our mind are designed to survive. So we will see those threats come in first, because it's better, the better safe than sorry sort of analogy. So noticing those threats, I think, can really bias our perspective in a way. And I think one of the things we talk about is a different emotional regulation system. So we do have a threat-based system. We also have a drive-based system, that I get up and go, our motivation, our drive to do things, but also the soothing system. And I think knowing those kind of three areas as well, the soothing system involves us connecting and slowing down and doing all those important things that help us feel settled. You mentioned going for the walk, that sort of thing. It brings us back down to where we can perform at our best, I think. So sometimes those small things really make a difference, and it does map onto our emotional regulation systems. So we think understanding that can be really helpful.
I was just going to say, even knowing that that's possible can make a big difference. An experience I've had when working with senior leaders is that they have almost normalized just how wound up they feel and just how exhausted they feel as being part of leadership, when it needn't be. Of course, there's going to be difficulties, but to feel wiped out and short on sleep and tense all the time, it's obviously not sustainable, and it's not something to normalize. It's not something to explain away, right?
Yeah, and organizational cultures can be like that, can't they? Who's the first person to email or last person to email, and that sort of again, you asked earlier about misconceptions. I think
Mm.
sometimes there's a perception about what is strong leadership, or talking about mental health might show some kind of weakness or something like that.
Yes.
And those cultures exist, and they're well. I think we'll think about that in the coaching psychology field, that wellness and performance do really go hand in hand.
I think that's a big reason for this series on sustainable leadership. All of my colleagues have been on the receiving end of messages over the years that, well, we'll look at well-being once we get performance sorted, or, well-being is a bit of a luxury. We need to attain our goals or reach our targets, when in fact it's the well-being of your employees that's going to get you there. It's not a blocker. And what I'm trying to advocate is for leaders to focus on their well-being, physical, social, and psychological, as much as they do the other things, because they have such an impact on the rest of the organization. And their well-being, however that manifests, has an impact on those around them, and how they role model what's healthy or unhealthy tends to spread, right? You mentioned a system earlier on, and that's the nature of systemic environments.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be, again, I think the leaders that I've worked with will often think something about them, but the good ones will say, actually, that's really helps me. That's really helped me personally. But I know that I can help other people. Some people are really grateful for that. They're like, actually, these are skills that I can share with other people, and that, both at work and at home. It might help with family, might help friends as well. So it's even beyond the workplace, but certainly within teams. I think leaders are, the insightful leaders are trying to role model. I need to be seen to be going for a walk, or I need to be seen to not be logging on at a certain time, or I'm noticing that I'm feeling stressed. What can I do about that? And I think it's proactivity again, and knowing that you're going to affect other people.
Proactivity is such an important part of this, I would argue, because it's much better than sort of dealing with the fallout of a crisis and having, maybe someone might have to take a break from work for an extended period to be able to rebuild and come back. And wouldn't it be better to avoid that completely if possible? The challenge, I suppose, with leaders is often who gives them feedback. If it's someone in the middle of the organization and they're stressed out and they're acting out, they may well get the feedback. Other people are noticing it. But with really senior leaders, who do they hear that from? We're relying on their self-awareness. We're relying on them understanding what helpful and healthy looks like. Otherwise, they are in full view of everyone, acting out their stress.
Yeah, and it can become very us and them, I think. The leaders, there's a lot of blaming that happens, and then that escalates the leader's sense of responsibility. I think it's a really lonely place as well. And again, I think that's why coaching helps, because you're not on your own with some of these things. It's really hard to sometimes talk to someone else within the organization if you're in a really senior role, or to talk in confidence. So yeah, it is having that awareness. I don't want to get complaints or grumblings, because it's really unhelpful to performance, isn't it? It's for everybody else, with the whole system before is affected. So yeah, how do we support leaders to be more self-aware, and we can open the chat?
That's a skill in itself, isn't it? Being able to reach for support, being able to have conversations about yourself and your well-being, and to open up to trusted others. I absolutely agree with the role of coaching there. Many leaders find that a refreshing thing, because I don't work for you, you don't work for me, we're not friends. It's a completely different relationship. And while I'm there to support, I can also keep you accountable for the things you say you're going to do, but also, as we mentioned at the outset, help normalize some of this experience for you, normalize the way minds work, the way emotions manifest, etc., etc. But they also need to do the work to make the changes that are going to benefit them. We touched on system. What are the sort of workplace factors that you know have the potential to detract from someone's mental health? What could organizations look out for?
Yeah, I think it's sort of when things are out of balance, really. So the sort of demands of the role. So versus resources, the ability to cope with that. I mean, reflecting on sort of some of my own work, it's been when there's constant change or supporting other people's distress without taking it somewhere else. So in clinical psychology, supervision is built in to as part of our professional existence. So we speak to other people about our work under the recognition that we're holding distress for other people as well. So I think that if there's a lot of distress in an organization, a leader will feel responsible for that as well, and will add to their own demands. I think one thing people have said a lot about is having a really full diary and lots of meetings and no space to do the actual work.
It's so common, isn't it?
Time and time again. I think, again, it's one of those misconceptions. A really busy diary is a good thing. Not necessarily. Sometimes having a bit more space is a good thing. So lots and lots of demands. I think external threats, that if there are lots of external threats, so sort of managing how a team is coping with that is another demand. The boundaries, and thinking about coaching, I think that sort of models a boundary. The framework of a coaching session can really help model boundaries. So knowing when to stop and to start things. That relationship helps with that. Trying to think, there are so many demands,
aren't there?
So many, and they will all be unique. And they come and they go. Change is a big one, I think. Constant change and managing change, and because change will always happen. So having some strategies to sort of some good habits to go to as well.
I'm literally working through a module right now for one of my clients on coping strategies and self-care. Build your own toolkit to help you navigate this stuff, because this stuff is inevitable. Wouldn't you want to be a little bit prepared to deal with that? And this is for sort of all hands in the organization. But again, with the leadership perspective, that disconnection, turning off, getting a break is even more difficult for them, especially if they buy into that narrative of I'm the only one. It all depends on me. It all sits with me. When do you get a break? When do you switch off? When do you do something else? That's a really tough one, especially with being always on electronically.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thinking about the boundaries, some people I've worked with have said, that they have specific times for checking in there. People know that, so that won't be that immediate response unless there's something that they need to respond to. So thinking about that boundary. And I think the other thing, Richard, is kind of being clear on what's important to us and what matters, and pursuing our values. And
it's a really important point, isn't it? Because if we focus on what matters, then we can, move the needle. We can do the important stuff. Leaders are never short of things that need their attention, but a lot of that is noise. A lot of that could be taken care of by someone else. A lot of it simply isn't important today. So, a big part of leaders' performance and well-being is how they think about their workload, how they decide what they will do and what they won't do, or what will get their attention. That model of all the emails, all the meetings, all the questions, it's like being on a production line that you've got no control over. You're always on, you're trying to do everything for everyone, and you're one person, you're a leader. How could you be expected to do all of that? So there's a flip side to this, isn't it? What do organizations expect of leaders, and how realistic is that?
Probably it's not realistic. It's a lot of it. What to expect? I guess I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is recognizing that we are all human and we all only have a certain capacity. and to perform at our best. We need to be able to work to that capacity. What we know is that we need to feel connected at work. Again, a lot of those conversations that I've had with people in leadership roles has been, particularly during the pandemic, people were really missing that kind of that kettle conversation or those chats around, creative ideas and creative thinking. So I think there are lots of well-being initiatives in organizations, but I think it's having sort of meaningful ones and perhaps co-produced ones, asking workplaces and leaders and all of the colleagues in the organizations about what is going to be a meaningful contribution to well-being.
Absolutely. I'll signpost for listeners and viewers right now. We've got some resources about workplace connection and loneliness on the website at worklifepsych.com/connect and thrive. I'll put a link in the notes, but we've got a downloadable guide there on how to deal with feelings of disconnection, the experience of loneliness, because that is something that can really erode our mental health and have a very negative impact on our physical health as well. Loneliness hampers our immune system, for example. So that throwaway comment that it's lonely at the top has serious implications for the mental health of leaders.
And I think people wonder whether it's okay to ask you if you're okay as well, particularly in hierarchical organizations. I've certainly known in healthcare of someone in the senior leadership team being caught up in an incident on a ward, but then people were asking other staff if they were okay, but not the leader, because of their role and position. And is there permission to ask for that? And of course, we're all human. We all have the same vulnerabilities, and you need to ask. We're okay.
And that's important as well. If we notice behavioral changes in our leaders, if we see that they're being different, are there any sort of things to look out for when it comes to those warning signs that a leader's mental health is under pressure?
Yeah, I think you're saying it is noticing, given it's our thoughts and emotions and our behavior that change when our mental health isn't as good. I think noticing, it's a good skill to have in general, but noticing, is someone more agitated, or is someone more cynical, or seeking reassurance, or more agitated, or coming in at different times, or dressing differently. Our appearance can be a signal that things aren't okay, or putting on a brave face, saying that everything's fine, but really you're seeing that things aren't going as well. Procrastination is another sign that you often see, or perfectionism, just differences in how someone works or how someone acts. I think there will be different indicators according to, perhaps whether someone's mood is low or whether someone's feeling anxious or burnt out. But I think it's just noticing the difference, to try and keep it simple, really.
Yeah. Well, this is it. For me, that says the prerequisite there is we need to know people as individuals. We need to get to know them so we can spot the difference, rather than they're up on this high level, sometimes literally, that we don't mix with them, we don't see them. And it's so important, therefore, that leaders are connected with other employees so that people can give them feedback, can ask them questions, can notice the difference, and maybe pass that feedback through someone else. But they're noticing that this person has changed. And those big ticket items are really common. Maybe someone isn't looking after their appearance so well, or maybe someone is working far too long, or is always on suddenly, or is having those anger outbursts, or frustration is manifesting when previously they were quite calm or approachable. So it's, if someone's always angry and always unapproachable, that's a different thing. But when we see the change, that could be an indication that they're wrestling with something. I think that the systemic perspective is also a useful one when we think about what people are coping with is sometimes the challenge, as in maybe organizational change. Sometimes what they're dealing with is their responses to the challenge. And sometimes what leaders also have to deal with is how other people are responding to their responses. So maybe they're saying, I have to do all of this. Their response is to really lean in to long hours and putting the effort in and being demanding of others. And then, of course, the impact from other people is pushback against that demand, those long hours. And so what was a naughty problem has now become bigger because of how we respond to it. And the response can often be a function of our existing strengths and preferences. So if I'm a conscientious and methodical leader, I'm going to lean into the detail and control, for example. So we need to be aware of the threats, but also what's my go-to for dealing with threats and how helpful is it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think, again, it's that values, something around values as well can occur. And I know I've had a conversation recently about this, that around a leader's values, and then perhaps noticing what other people's values might be, and appreciating that we have a difference in values, and that there's lots of good values out there, but perhaps their I don't know, need to perhaps work harder, do more, might be not the same for everybody else because the circumstances are different. And appreciating individual differences and individual needs, and being able, like you said before, getting to know the people you're working with and what's important to them, and how are they going to perform at their best, and what are their strengths. So I think taking a very kind of strengths-based view of this. The other thing I talk about with often in education settings actually is compassion. So I'm thinking about the flows of compassion. So very often we find it easier to be more compassionate to other people than to ourselves, but also it's really important for compassion to flow from others to us as well, and from ourselves to ourselves. So to be mindful of the self-critic that most of us, probably all of us, have. I think that's really correlated with how our mental health is, or a high self-critic is correlated with poor mental health. So to speak in a kind of way to ourselves, but also back to the systemic thing, creating those kind of compassionate cultures. And when I talk about compassion, I don't mean it as in a kind of a sort of soft, fluffy thing. There's a lot of courage involved in compassion.
Absolutely.
I always talk about Paul Gilbert's definition, which is that kind of sensitivity to the suffering in ourselves or others. And then the second part is that commitment to try and alleviate it or prevent it. So,
that's the bit people forget. Yeah, absolutely. And if we turn this on its head, leaders are by definition the people that can have the most impact on the culture. They can change things if they're not working. Whereas someone who's just joined the lower ranks of the organization hasn't got that much influence or organizational power. So that's the positive of the power that comes with leadership. If you realize we don't have enough compassion, or we're demanding too much, or working hours are unsustainable, you are the people that can make the change around that. And sometimes leaders need to be reminded of that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a whole lot of responsibility that comes, but it doesn't need to be a bad thing. It doesn't mean I'm holding all the problems. It's almost holding a lot of the solutions.
So we need to wrap up. Time is not our friend today, but maybe if I reflect some of the key points I've heard, because I've really enjoyed looking at leadership through this perspective. One, mental health is the continuum. It's all of those experiences, not just when we're ill.
Yeah.
Secondly, being proactive and investing and looking after our mental health lessens the chance that we will have to reach out for that professional support at some time. Not completely, but at least you're lowering the chance of that happening through your own approach or neglecting it completely. The fact that leaders work in a system has implications both for how they're buying into the culture, how they're reflecting it, how they're role modeling, how they're responding to the system, and how much of that is maybe intentional versus it's automatic. We always do it this way, or I assume that's what's expected. And you flagged ACT as an approach, a set of skills that leaders could use to help them better navigate this stuff, because it enables you to do more of what matters, be values aligned, and so on, rather than maybe engage in responses to challenge that aren't going to help you in the long run. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's a great summary. What?
So I'm going to be sharing a whole bunch of resources on the back of this episode to signpost for other people. We mentioned connection and loneliness. I'll reference psychological flexibility. Obviously, put a link to yourself if people have an interest in finding out more about you. We'd love your questions. I'd love to hear from listeners and viewers. You can email me at podcast@WorkLifePsych.com. You can find all of the resources supporting this initiative at WorkLifePsych.com/sustainable leadership. And we'd love to hear what you think about this perspective on it. If you're a leader, what is it you need? If you work for a leader, what do you want to know about their mental well-being and the sustainability of their approach? But as we finish up for today, is there anything you'd like ringing in the ears of our listeners when it comes to mental health in the workplace?
I think it's ACT early, really, and the noticing there, and the if we can prevent distress, then let's do that. Be proactive, reach out, let's prevent it from happening, and support each other.
Fantastic. That is a lovely message to finish on. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise. And for everyone else out there, thanks for joining us today.